The cold of the Bel-Air mansion's marble floor seeped through Kelly's thin silk robe, a chilling contrast to the warm, sticky blood pooling beneath her. She was on her hands and knees, one hand clutching her abdomen in a desperate, useless attempt to protect the life inside her. Her breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. Above her, her husband, Charles, stood panting, his hand still red, his $5,000 suit jacket stained. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were wide with a new, unfamiliar terror. He hadn't just lost control, he had lost the narrative. And he knew, in the dreadful silence of the room, that a small, blinking red light in the corner of the ceiling had just become the only witness that mattered. 2 months earlier, the Bel-Air hills shimmered in the amber glow of a perfect Los Angeles sunset. From the outside, the Vance estate was a monument to modern success. It wasn't a home, it was a fortress of glass, steel, and white stone, overlooking a city that Charles Vance was convinced he owned. Tonight, it was the backdrop for the Vance Foundation's annual Future of LA Gala. Kelly Harlow Vance, 6 months pregnant and radiant in a custom navy blue gown, stood by her husband's side. Her smile was a well-practiced masterpiece of effortless grace. Charles, with his Kennedy-esque hair and disarming smile, was in his element, one hand on the small of Kelly's back, the other gripping a champagne flute he hadn't sipped. "Jim, it's incredible what you're doing with the new tech fund," Charles boomed, clapping a Silicon Valley billionaire on the shoulder. "Kelly and I were just saying, we have to have you and Sarah over on the boat, only if you promise to let me see that new Rivian," the man laughed. "And Kelly, you're glowing. Pregnancy suits you." "Thank you, Jim," Kelly said, her voice soft. "We're very excited. Just 3 more months." Charles squeezed her back, a gesture that looked like affection, but felt like a correction. "She's a trooper. Insisted on planning this whole thing herself, didn't you, Angel?" Kelly's smile didn't falter, though the insistence had been his. "I had a lot of help." Later that evening, the crowd thinned, and the jazz band packed up. Kelly was rubbing her swollen ankles when her phone buzzed. A text from her college friend, Chloe. "Saw pics from the gala. You look like a princess. Also, you've missed my last 3 calls. Is he still being him? Call me, seriously, Kel." Kelly's thumb hovered over the message. She started to type. "Everything's fine, just busy." But deleted it. The lie tasted like ash. She quickly powered her phone off, just as Charles walked into their cavernous bedroom, yanking off his bow tie. The public charm dissolved the instant the door clicked shut. "You were quiet tonight," he said, not a question. He tossed the tie onto a chair. "I was tired, Charles. My back is aching." "You looked tired," he corrected, pulling a whiskey bottle from a cabinet. "You stared at Jim Henderson's wife for almost a minute. It was awkward. She asked me if you were feeling all right." Kelly stiffened. "I was just thinking. I didn't realize I was staring." "Well, you were." He poured 2 fingers of Macallan 25. "People notice these things. It makes me look like I'm dragging you here. It makes us look weak. I'm 6 months pregnant. Not weak," she said, her voice smaller than she intended. Charles took a long swallow of his whiskey, his eyes cold. "Don't get defensive. I'm just giving you feedback. You wanted to be a partner in this life, Kelly. That means performing, even when you're tired." He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city lights. "We have the Times coming to do a feature on the house and the nursery next week. I expect you to be on." Kelly turned away, running a hand over her round belly. "Of course, Charles." As she walked toward the bathroom, her eyes caught the small, dark lens of the security camera mounted in the corner. When they first moved in, Charles had insisted on a state-of-the-art system. "For your protection, Angel," he'd said, "when I'm traveling." But he wasn't traveling. and as the tiny, almost invisible red light blinked, Kelly felt a cold dread. It wasn't there to keep intruders out. It was there to keep her in. She felt like a specimen in a jar, her perfect life a sterile prison of glass and stone, and the only person she could talk to was the baby kicking softly beneath her heart. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, the water running to cover the sound of her voice. "He's just under a lot of pressure. It'll be different when you're here. He'll be different." But as she met her own eyes in the mirror, she saw the lie. And just under her jawline, faint and yellowing, was the ghost of a bruise from 2 weeks ago, when he'd accidentally grabbed her too hard during an argument about her father. She covered it with concealer then, and she was covering for him now. It was a role she had perfected, and she was terrified of forgetting her lines. The smell of paint and new carpet should have been joyful. The nursery was the one room in the house Kelly had tried to claim as her own. It had the best light, overlooking a garden of white roses. She'd spent weeks agonizing over the perfect shade of blue for the walls, a soft, dreamy color called morning sky. She was supervising the painters when Charles came home early, a rare and usually ominous event. He stood in the doorway, his briefcase in hand, his face a mask of controlled disapproval. "What is this?" he asked. The painters, sensing the shift in temperature, immediately busied themselves in the corner. "It's the paint, the one I showed you." "Morning sky?" Kelly smiled, trying to inject enthusiasm she didn't feel. "It's even prettier in person, don't you think?" "It's baby blue," he said, his voice flat. "It's common. I thought we agreed on the silver-grey palette." "We looked at the grey," Kelly said, her smile faltering. "But it felt so cold, Charles. This is for a baby. I wanted it to feel warm, and you wanted it," he interrupted, setting his briefcase down with a sharp thud. He walked into the center of the room, staring at the walls as if they had personally offended him. "Kelly, this is the Vance estate, not a suburban tract home. We have a brand. The Times is coming. This looks like a gender reveal party." Tears of frustration and hormonal anger pricked her eyes. "It's a nursery, Charles, not a boardroom. It's my baby, too." The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. The air crackled. The painters froze. Charles turned to her, his voice dropping to a terrifying, silky whisper. "Your baby? Your baby? As in, not mine." "No, that's not what I meant. I just meant—" "I know what you meant." He stepped closer, invading her space, forcing her to tilt her head back to look at him. "You meant that you get to make decisions, that your feelings about warmth suddenly trump the multi-million-dollar image we have spent 5 years building. An image, I might add, that pays for this very room and the roof over your ungrateful head." "Charles, please," she whispered, glancing at the painters who were desperately trying to become invisible. "Get out," Charles snapped at them. "Both of you. Now." The men scrambled, grabbing their things and practically running down the hall. The moment they were gone, Charles's mask dropped completely. "How dare you undermine me in front of the help?" he hissed. "I wasn't—" "You were. You stood there and argued with me about a color. Do you have any idea the pressure I am under? The new fund is lagging, the SEC is sniffing around our last acquisition, and I come home to this circus." "I'm sorry," Kelly whispered, her hand going to her belly. The baby was kicking, agitated. "I just wanted it to be nice." "Nice?" he scoffed, turning away from her in disgust. "I'll tell you what's nice. A wife who supports her husband. A wife who understands what's at stake. A wife who doesn't make him look like a fool." He pointed a finger at her. "I'll be calling the designer. This room will be repainted. Silver grey. And you will smile and tell the Times it was your idea." Kelly nodded, the tears she'd been fighting now streaming silently down her face. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a sob. "And stop crying," he said, as if reading her mind. "It's manipulative. You look pathetic." He picked up his briefcase and left, the click of the door echoing in the too-blue room. Kelly sank into the unassembled rocking chair, her body shaking. She looked at the camera in the corner of this room, too. He'd insisted. "To watch the nanny," he'd claimed. "He didn't mean it, Gracie," she whispered to her stomach, having already secretly named the baby girl she was sure she was carrying. "He's just stressed. He loves us." "He does." The lie felt thinner every time she said it. The baby kicked again, a sharp jab to her ribs, as if to say, "I don't believe you." Kelly hadn't known she could feel this lonely, in a house so full of expensive things, in a life so full of success. She felt like a ghost haunting her own home, and the only proof she was real was the tiny, restless life moving inside her. On Sunday afternoon, the house was quiet. Charles was playing golf in Palm Springs, a mandatory networking trip. The silence was a balm, and Kelly allowed herself the simple luxury of sitting by the pool with a book, her feet up. For a few hours, she could almost pretend she was free. Her phone rang, and the screen lit up with a picture that made her heart ache. Dad, Judge James, Jim Harlow. A man whose quiet integrity and moral compass were legendary in the Washington, D.C. circuit. He was the one person Charles truly feared, not for his wealth, but for his reputation. A reputation Charles could never buy. "Hi, Daddy," she answered, her voice automatically brighter. "Hey there, Kel. How's my favorite girl?" His voice was a warm, steady baritone, a stark contrast to the sharp, cutting tones she lived with. "I'm good, Dad. Just sitting outside. It's a beautiful day here." Good. And how's my grandbaby?" "Kicking up a storm," she laughed, and it felt real. "I think she's going to be a soccer player, or a lawyer, like her grandpa." "I'd prefer the lawyer," he chuckled. "Less head trauma." There was a pause, the easy banter fading. "You sound tired, Kelly." Her defenses snapped right back up. "Just pregnant, you know. Standard third trimester stuff. The doctor says I'm perfectly healthy." "That's not what I meant. I spoke to Chloe yesterday. She said she hasn't been able to get a hold of you. Said she's worried." Kelly's stomach tightened. "Oh, you know Chloe. She worries if I don't text back in an hour. I've just been busy. The gala, the nursery, the magazine feature. Charles has a lot going on." "Him?" "Right." The disapproval in his voice was subtle but clear. He'd never liked Charles, had seen the narcissistic streak from day one, but Kelly had begged him to trust her. "Kelly, listen to me. This life you're living, it's a long way from home. You know you can always come home, right? No questions asked. You and that baby will have a place. Always." A lump formed in her throat. She wanted to scream, "Yes! Come and get me! He's a monster!" But the shame was too deep. Admitting it would make it real. It would mean she had failed. "I know, Daddy, thank you. But everything is fine. Really. Charles he's excited about the baby. He's just under a lot of pressure." "Pressure," her father repeated, the word tasting like an excuse. "Right. Well, don't let his pressure become your problem. You call me, not next week. You call me tomorrow. Understood?" "Yes, sir," she smiled. "I love you, Dad." "I love you more, Kel. Take care of my grandchild." She hung up, the feeling of warmth and safety fading as a shadow fell over her. Charles stood there, golf shirt clinging to his shoulders, a toxic blend of suspicion and rage in his eyes. He must have gotten home early. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked, her heart hammering. "Long enough," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "That was your father." "Yes, he was just checking in." "Checking in." Charles slowly took off his sunglasses, his eyes narrowing. "What were you telling him? What pressure am I under?" "Nothing, just work, the new fund. I didn't say anything bad, Charles, I swear." "You swore," he mocked. He ripped the phone from her hand, his fingers digging into her wrist. "Let me see." "Charles, don't! You're hurting me!" He fumbled with the lock, but her Face ID didn't work from his angle. Enraged, he threw the phone onto the concrete, where it skittered and stopped. "You think you can run to him? You think you can whisper behind my back about my business? About my life?" "No, it was nothing," she cried, cradling her wrist. "Your father," he spat, "with his perfect little life and his robes. You think he's better than me? You think you're better than me?" "I never said that. Please, Charles, you're scaring me." He saw the fear in her eyes, and it seemed to calm him, as if he'd won. He visibly composed himself, straightening his shirt. "We'll have to get you a new phone," he said calmly, as if they'd just discussed the weather. "And from now on, I'd prefer you take calls with your father on speaker. We're a family. We don't have secrets." He walked inside, leaving her shaking by the pool. The unspoken threat hung in the pristine air. "I'm listening. I'm watching. You have no one but me." She knew then that her father's offer of home was 1,000 miles away, and the man inside this home would never, ever let her leave. The following weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. The failed merger Charles had hinted at was now public knowledge. His company's stock was in a freefall. The pressure he'd used as an excuse had metastasized into full-blown paranoia, and his obsession, his outlet, became Kelly. The cameras were his weapon. Kelly started to notice things. He would call her from his office downstairs and ask, "Why didn't you eat the lunch Maria made you?" She'd be in the nursery, reading, and her phone would buzz with a text from him. "I don't like that book. It's too sentimental." He was watching her. Constantly. On his phone, on his office computer. The house, her safe space, was now a 24/7 reality show where she was the only cast member, and the only audience was her tormentor. She felt herself shrinking, becoming a ghost. She moved quietly, spoke only when spoken to, and spent hours in the one place he couldn't see, the massive, marble-clad master bathroom. She would run the shower just to sit on the floor and cry silently, her hand on her belly, whispering apologies to her unborn daughter. One afternoon, fueled by a desperate, unfamiliar surge of defiance, she did something reckless. While he was in a meeting, she dragged a chair into the living room, climbed up, and unplugged the camera. Its little red light died. The rush was intoxicating. She felt brave, even triumphant. The feeling lasted exactly 2 hours. He came home. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He just walked into the living room, saw the unplugged cord dangling, and looked at her. He tilted his head, a slow, cold smile spreading across his face. It was the most terrifying expression she had ever seen. "Did you do that?" he asked softly. She couldn't speak. She just nodded. "I see," he said. He plugged it back in. The red light blinked back to life. "Don't ever," he whispered, cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin in a grotesque parody of affection. "Touch my things again." He walked away. Later that night, she found a new gift on her nightstand. A small white box. Inside wasn't jewelry. It was a tablet. "What's this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A convenience," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "It's linked to the house feed, all the cameras. Now you can see what I see. You can check on the nanny when the baby comes. You can see who's at the front gate. We can be a team, Kelly. Total transparency." She turned it on. The screen flickered, splitting into a grid. The kitchen, the living room, the nursery, the hallway. Her own face stared back at her from the bedroom camera. It wasn't a gift. It was a threat. It was a taunt. I'm watching. And now you're going to watch yourself being watched. It was the move of a true narcissist, forcing his victim to participate in her own surveillance. The psychological knot was so tight, she thought she might be going insane. That evening, she tried one last time to appeal to the man she'd married. He was in his office, the faint, sweet smell of bourbon in the air. "Charles," she said softly from the doorway. I'm not feeling well. I think the stress, it's not good for the baby. Maybe I could go visit my dad for a week, just until the baby comes." He swiveled in his chair, his eyes dark. "Your father? You want to go running to him now? After you've been unplugging my property and acting like a child?" "I'm not acting like a child. I'm pregnant and I'm scared," she cried, the words finally breaking free. Scared. He stood up, his 6-foot frame seeming to suck all the air from the room. "You're scared of me?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You have everything. A mansion, money, a life anyone would kill for. And you're scared." He walked toward her, and she flinched, backing away. The motion, that tiny, involuntary flinch, lit a fuse. His face twisted. "You flinch from me? In my own house?" "Charles, no, You don't need your father, Kelly," he said, backing her against the wall, his hand planting flat beside her head. "You have me. You and the baby. You're not going anywhere. Do you understand me?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face, her body rigid with terror. "Yes," she whispered. "I understand. Good." He smiled that same cold smile. "Now, why don't you go upstairs and rest? You look tired." As she fled up the stairs, she knew. Her father's offer was void. Her friend's calls were useless. The house had won. He had won. She was completely and utterly alone, a prisoner waiting for a sentence she couldn't even name. And in the hallway, the little red light of the camera followed her every step. The night it all ended began with the sound of rain. Not a gentle LA sprinkle, but a furious, pounding storm that lashed against the glass walls of the mansion, as if nature itself was trying to break in. Kelly was in the living room, folding and refolding a tiny white blanket. It was past midnight. The dinner she'd asked Maria to keep warm was cold and congealed on the dining room table. The doctor's appointment to check on the baby's position, the one he had promised to attend, had been that afternoon. He'd never shown up. The front door slammed open, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Kelly flinched, her hand flying to her belly. "Gracie, it's okay, shh." Charles stalked in, his expensive coat soaked, his face a mask of thunder. He didn't just smell of whiskey, he reeked of it. "You're late," Kelly said, her voice a small, trembling thing. "I was worried." He ripped his coat off and threw it to the floor. "Worried?" He laughed, a broken, ugly sound. "You were worried." He gestured wildly around the room. This whole thing, it's a joke." "What happened, Charles? You missed the appointment. The doctor said—" "The doctor!" he roared, his voice cracking. "You think I care about the doctor? The deal is dead, Kelly. The whole damn fund is collapsing. The SEC just froze my assets. Froze them. Do you know what that means?" She shook her head, her blood running cold. I don't... It means we're done. It means this house, the cars, the galas, it's over. And you sit here, folding a blanket. "Charles, please, you need to calm down," she pleaded, rising slowly. "We can talk about this in the morning. Yelling won't fix it. Calm down." He advanced on her, his eyes bloodshot and terrifying. That's what your father would say, isn't it? Stay calm, Charles. Think reasonably, Charles. That smug, arrogant old man. You've been talking to him, haven't you? You told him I was failing. No, I swear I didn't. Liar. He grabbed a crystal whiskey glass from the bar cart, the one he'd been using earlier, and hurled it against the wall. It shattered, a violent explosion of glass and sound. Kelly screamed, cowering back. Please stop! You're scaring me! You're scaring the baby! The baby! He spat, his face contorted. That's all you care about, isn't it? Your perfect little escape plan. Your own little piece of the Harlow legacy. You think you can just have this baby and your father will come and rescue you from me? That's not true. I love this baby. I loved you. Love? He was inches from her now. You don't know what love is. You're just like him. Cold. Judging. Perfect. His face twisted, and before she could even process the movement, his hand arced through the air. The slap was shocking. Brutal. The sound of it, sharp and wet, seemed to suck all the air from the room. Kelly's head snapped to the side, the force sending her stumbling backward. She tripped over the corner of the low marble coffee table. She cried out, her hands flying to her belly, but her balance was gone. She fell hard, her side and hip cracking against the sharp stone edge, before she crumpled to the floor. A new kind of pain. A terrifying, internal, ripping pain tore through her abdomen. "Richard!" she screamed, using a name she hadn't called him in years, a desperate plea to a man who no longer existed. For a second, the rage in Charles's face was replaced by a flicker of stunned horror. He looked at his hand, then at her on the floor. "Get up," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Stop being so dramatic, Kelly. Get up." "I can't," she gasped, tears blurring her vision. The pain was blinding. "Charles, something's wrong. Please, the baby." She pushed herself up onto her hands, and that's when she felt it. The warmth spreading across the cold marble. She looked down. Blood, so much blood. "Oh God," she sobbed, a primal, animal sound of terror. "God, no, Charles, help me." He just stared, his face pale, his mind visibly racing, not with concern but with calculation. He was already building the alibi. From the hallway, a new voice pierced the horror. "Mr. Vance? Mrs. Vance?" Maria, the housekeeper, stood there, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. She had heard the crash, the scream. She saw the blood. "Dios mio!" she shrieked, rushing forward. "Mrs. Kelly, what did he do?" She dropped to her knees, grabbing a throw pillow to press against Kelly's side. "Call 911, now! Lem!" Charles fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he could barely unlock it. Kelly's vision was tunneling. The room spun. The last thing she saw before the darkness took over was her husband, frozen in his panic, and beyond him, in the corner of the ceiling, a tiny, steady, blinking red light. It sees, she thought, a strange, distant calm washing over her. It sees everything, and then nothing. The ambulance sirens wailed, a sound that seemed to cut through the rain-soaked hills of Bel Air, announcing the end of a secret. Kelly drifted in and out of consciousness. She remembered the frantic face of a paramedic, the cold prick of an IV, and the agonizing pain in her belly. But most of all, she remembered the silence. When she woke up, the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of a heart monitor filled her senses. The world was a fuzzy, sterile white. Her father, Judge James Harlow, was sitting in a chair by her bed. His face was a ruin. He looked like he had aged 20 years. "Daddy," she whispered. Her throat was raw. He shot up, his hand instantly finding hers. "Kelly, oh God, Kel!" He couldn't hide the break in his voice. She knew. Before he even spoke, she knew. Her free hand moved to her stomach, which felt empty. Wrong. "The baby," she said. It wasn't a question. Her father's eyes, the eyes of a man who had seen the worst of humanity and never flinched, filled with tears. He squeezed her hand, his shoulders shaking. "Gracie," he whispered, using the name she'd told him. She didn't make it, honey. The fall, the bleeding was too severe. They did everything they could, Kelly. I'm so sorry." A sound tore from Kelly's throat, a deep, hollow wail that was more animal than human. It was the sound of a world ending. She turned her face into the pillow, her body convulsing with sobs that felt like they were ripping her apart. Her father held her, murmuring, "I've got you. I'm here. I've got you," as his own tears stained her hospital gown. Across town, Charles Vance sat in a very different white room, an interrogation room at the West LA police station. His $5,000 suit was rumpled, his hair a mess. His high-priced lawyer, a shark named Shapiro, was doing all the talking. "It was a tragic accident, Detective," Shapiro said smoothly. "Mrs. Vance is pregnant. She's clumsy. She slipped on the wet marble after Mr. Vance came in from the rain. He tried to catch her. He's distraught, absolutely devastated. He's so distraught he waited almost 10 minutes to call 911, the detective asked, his voice bored. The housekeeper called Mr. Vance, not you. He was in shock, Shapiro countered. His pregnant wife was bleeding on the floor. What would you do? Charles just stared at the table, repeating his mantra. I love my wife. It was an accident. I love my wife. But a different kind of justice was already in motion. Maria, the housekeeper, was at her sister's apartment in East LA, trembling, clutching a rosary. The police had taken her statement, but she knew men like Charles Vance. She knew how they made problems disappear. She knew her word meant nothing against his millions. But she also knew something he'd forgotten. She knew the password to the cloud security server. Vance Legacy 2020. He'd given it to her months ago so she could let in the gardeners. Her hands shaking, she logged in on her sister's laptop. She found the file. Living room. 12:03 a.m. She clicked play. She watched it all again. The argument, the slap, the fall, the blood, the way he just stood there. Madre de Dios, she whispered, crossing herself. She downloaded the file. It was massive. What to do? The police. They already had it, but his lawyers would bury it. It would become inadmissible. She thought of Mrs. Kelly, the only person in that cold house who had ever asked about her children, who had ever treated her like a human being. She remembered a name Mrs. Kelly had mentioned, a friend she wasn't allowed to call. Chloe. Maria found Chloe's profile on Instagram. A journalist, a blogger with a fiery reputation. With trembling fingers, Maria wrote a message. I work for Mrs. Kelly Vance. She's in the hospital. He hurt her. This is the proof. Please, for the love of God, help her. She attached the file, and she hit send. In her downtown loft, Chloe Devereaux's phone buzzed. Annoyed, she checked the message from a stranger. She read the words. She saw the attachment. She pressed play. Chloe's blood turned to ice. She watched the entire horrifying 4-minute clip. You son of a bitch, she breathed. You absolute monster. She was a journalist. She knew the rules. She also knew that the rules were designed to protect men like Charles Vance. To hell with the rules, she thought. She uploaded the video to a secure server, stripped the metadata, and sent the link to every major news outlet, every gossip blog, and every activist group she knew. She posted it on her own Twitter feed, which had 500,000 followers. She tagged Charles Vance, she tagged his company, and she wrote a simple caption. Here is venture capitalist Charles Vance, husband of Kelly Harlow Vance, at his Bel Air home tonight. He's currently telling police she slipped. This is a lie. He murdered his unborn child. Minor justice for Kelly. Marsak Shaw, Charles Vance. She hit tweet, and the world exploded. The video didn't just go viral. It was a digital detonation. Within an hour, justice for Kelly was the #1 trending topic worldwide. By morning, the video had 10 million views. By noon, 50 million. It played on Good Morning America. It was analyzed on CNN. It was dissected on The View. Every talk show, every news program, every podcast led with the footage. The sound of the slap, the sound of Kelly's scream, echoed from millions of screens. The public's response was not just outrage, it was a primal, collective roar. Charles Vance, who had built his life on a curated image of success and charm, watched his reputation be publicly executed in real time. At 9:01 a.m., the stock of his company, Vance Capital, plummeted 70%. By 10:30 a.m., his board of directors had convened an emergency meeting. By 11 a.m., he was fired as CEO, effective immediately. News vans swarmed the gates of his Bel Air mansion, their satellite dishes pointed at the house like weapons. Reporters shouted questions at the stone walls. "Mr. Vance, did you kill your baby? Is it true your father-in-law is a federal judge? Charles, do you have a comment on the video?" Inside, Charles was a caged animal. He hurled his phone at the TV, shattering the screen that showed his own face over the Chiron millionaire monster. "Shapiro!" he screamed at his lawyer. "Fix this! Sue them! Sue everyone!" "There's nothing to sue for, Charles," Shapiro yelled back, stuffing papers into his briefcase. "It's a true video. They have you. You're toxic. I'm advising you to accept the DA's offer of protective custody. You aren't safe here." "I'm not going anywhere." "You're not listening. The district attorney just issued a warrant for your arrest. Aggravated assault, domestic battery, and second-degree murder for the fetus. They're not playing, Charles. The whole world is watching." In the sterile quiet of her hospital room, Kelly watched too. Her father had tried to turn the TV off, but she'd insisted. She watched the anchors dissect her private hell. She saw women crying at a makeshift memorial of flowers and teddy bears growing outside her hospital. She read tweets from senators, from celebrities, from survivors. "We believe you, Kelly. This is what domestic violence looks like. It can happen to anyone. He's not a monster. He's a common abuser with a good PR team." Not anymore. Chloe, her friend, was on CNN, her face fierce with rage. "I'm not a neutral journalist on this. I'm her friend. I watched this man isolate her for years. I listened to her make excuses for him. This wasn't a loss of control. This was the ultimate act of control. He knew he was losing his money, so he destroyed the one thing she had left." Tears streamed down Kelly's face. But they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of a strange, terrifying, profound relief. "He told me I was crazy," she whispered to her father, her eyes glued to the screen. "He told me I was manipulative, that no one would ever believe me over him. He said I was nothing without him." Judge Harlow stroked her hair, his face grim. "He was wrong, Kel. He was wrong about everything." The door to the hospital room opened. Two detectives stood there, their hats in their hands. "Judge Harlow, Mrs. Vance," the lead detective said, his voice gentle. "We're so sorry for your loss. We just wanted to let you know Charles Vance was arrested 10 minutes ago. He is in custody." Kelly closed her eyes. The beep of the heart monitor was the only sound. The public storm raged outside, but in her room, a different kind of storm, the one that had lived inside her for 3 years, had finally broken. "Thank you," she whispered. She was no longer Mrs. Vance. She was just Kelly. And she had survived. The arrest was only the beginning. The viral outrage was a fire, but fires burn out. James Harlow dealt in stone. He knew the law was slow, methodical, and easily swayed by money. Charles Vance had endless money, but James Harlow had the system. He took a leave of absence from the bench. He flew his entire DC team to Los Angeles, setting up a war room in his hotel suite overlooking the city. This was no longer a family matter. It was a campaign. Charles Vance is a creature of image, Judge Harlow told the DA and her team, his voice a quiet, commanding steel. His lawyers aren't going to fight the facts. They can't. They're going to fight the narrative. They will paint my daughter as a hysterical, gold-digging, unstable woman who provoked him. They will say she slipped, and the video is misleading. We've seen it, Judge, the DA said. The video is damning. It's not enough, Harlow said, his cold gaze sweeping the room. A jury can be confused. We don't just need the video. We need to dismantle his entire life. We need to show a pattern. For the next 2 weeks, James Harlow became the ghost at Charles's feast, while Shapiro and a newly hired high-profile PR team tried to leak sympathetic stories about Charles's troubled childhood and immense stress. Harlow worked the back channels. He didn't just talk to the DA, he talked to the SEC. He used his federal connections to unseal the investigation into Vance Capital. It wasn't just a failed merger, it was fraud. Massive, undeniable wire fraud and insider trading. Charles hadn't just been under pressure, he'd been on the verge of an indictment that would have sent him to prison for 30 years, regardless of what he'd done to Kelly. This was the unexpected reversal Harlow needed. This is his motive, Harlow explained to the DA, slapping the SEC file on her desk. He wasn't enraged at Kelly. He was terrified. He was about to lose everything. She mentioned her father, and he snapped. Because I represent the law he was trying to outrun. He saw his world ending, and he silenced the one person who could walk away from the rubble and expose him for what he truly is. A pathetic, terrified con man. Harlow's team also found Maria, the housekeeper. They moved her and her family to a safe house. They got her a new lawyer. Maria's testimony wasn't just about the night. It was about the months before. The yelling, the thrown objects, the way Kelly would hide in the bathroom. The note left after she unplugged the camera. Then Harlow played his masterstroke. He personally visited the offices of Shapiro, Charles's lawyer. Mr. Shapiro, Harlow said, sitting opposite the shark in his glass-walled office. I'm here as a father, not a judge. I appreciate that, Jim, Shapiro said, leaning back. My client is prepared to offer a generous settlement for Kelly's pain and suffering. A civil matter. Harlow smiled, a thin, cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. You think this is about money? How very... You. He slid a file across the desk. That's the SEC's case against your client. Wire fraud. Racketeering. They're moving to indict next week. I just spoke to the U.S. attorney. They're offering a deal. Shapiro's eyes scanned the first page, and his color drained. He pleads guilty to my daughter's case, Harlow continued, his voice a velvet hammer. All charges. Aggravated assault, second-degree murder for Gracie. He takes the maximum sentence. In exchange, the feds will take his cooperation on the fraud case into consideration. He might get 20 years instead of 40. He'll be out by the time he's 60. You're leveraging your daughter's tragedy for a federal case? Shapiro asked, aghast. Harlow stood, leaning over the desk. I'm using a monster's financial crimes to ensure he can't escape justice for his human ones. You tell him. He can fight me in court, where I will personally ensure this SEC file is leaked to the same press that's already crucifying him, and he will lose both trials and die in prison, or he can plead guilty, save us all the spectacle and see daylight again. He straightened his tie. You have 24 hours to convince your client to fall on his sword. This is the only deal he will ever get. This isn't a negotiation. It's a surrender. Charles Vance, the man who controlled everything, had been perfectly, legally, and ruthlessly checkmated. Charles, in his boundless arrogance, refused the deal. He's bluffing, he told Shapiro. No jury will convict me of murder for a slip. I'll charm them. I'll apologize. I'll cry. Just get me in the room. The trial became the biggest media event of the year. It was LA's new OJ trial. The courtroom was packed. Kelly Harlow, her father at her side, walked through a sea of cameras every day, her face pale but resolute. The first week was a blur of technical testimony. The paramedics, the detectives, the digital forensics expert who verified the video's authenticity. Then the defense began. As Harlow had predicted, it was a character assassination. Mrs. Harlow Vance, Shapiro began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. You were unhappy in your marriage, weren't you? My husband was abusive, Kelly said, her voice clear and steady. That's not what I asked. You were unhappy. You knew your father, a powerful federal judge, disapproved of your husband. You knew your husband's business was in trouble. Weren't you looking for a way out? A very profitable way out? Objection! The DA shouted. Counsel is badgering and implying facts, not in evidence. Sustained, the judge said. Move on, Mr. Shapiro. Shapiro smiled. The seed was planted. Let's talk about the night in question. You argued. You screamed at him, didn't you? You told him you were leaving, that you were taking the baby and going to your father. No, I told him he was scaring me. You were hysterical, weren't you? You threatened him. You told him your father would ruin him. No, he was drunk. He was angry about his business. He threw a glass. And you charged at him, didn't you? Shapiro's voice rose. You attacked him, and he pushed you away. He was defending himself. The courtroom murmured. No, Kelly said, her voice quiet. No? Then why? Shapiro boomed. In the video, are you seen moving toward him right before he strikes? This was the linchpin of their defense. A single, blurry moment. Kelly looked at Shapiro. Then she looked past him, at the jury. 12 normal people. 8 of them women. I wasn't charging him, she said, her voice resonating with a sudden, terrible strength. I was trying to get his keys. He said he was going to drive. He was drunk. I didn't want him to hurt anyone else. Shapiro froze. This wasn't in any report. Kelly's voice broke, but she didn't stop. I spent 3 years protecting him, protecting his image, making excuses for his pressure, lying to my friends, to my father, lying to myself. That night, he was a monster. But I still didn't want him to get in a car. I was still trying to protect him. She looked directly at Charles, who was staring at her, his mask of contrition shattered, replaced by pure, naked rage. He had been outmaneuvered. Violence doesn't start with a fist, Kelly told the jury, the tears now flowing freely. It starts with a whisper. You look tired. Don't talk to your friends. Why are you crying? It starts with control, with the cameras, with the fear. The slap. The slap was just the end of a war he had been waging against me for years. She placed her hand on her stomach, where a phantom ache still resided. He didn't just take my daughter's life that night. He took my life, my voice, my home, my sanity. He was so terrified of me leaving him that he killed the only part of me that was left. She held the jury's gaze. He didn't mean to. He was under pressure. That's what he'll say. But it doesn't bring my daughter back. It doesn't change the fact that he watched me bleed and did nothing. He wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting his image. He is a void. and he tried to pull me into it." The courtroom was utterly silent. Even Shapiro had no more questions. The DA stood for her closing. "Kelly Harlow just told you the truth. The video shows you what happened. Her testimony told you why. He wasn't a man under pressure. He was a fraud about to be exposed. He wasn't a husband. He was a zookeeper. And when his prize exhibit finally showed a spark of defiance, he put her down. Find him guilty. For Kelly and for Gracie." The jury was out for 45 minutes. "On the count of aggravated assault, how do you find?" "Guilty." A gasp went through the courtroom. Kelly gripped her father's hand. "On the count of domestic battery, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the count of second-degree murder, how do you find?" Charles Vance stared at the jury foreman, his charming smile frozen on his face, a ghastly, confident rictus. "Guilty." The smile vanished. Charles lunged forward, his chair crashing to the ground. "No, you can't! She lied! She lied!" he roared, pointing at Kelly. Bailiffs swarmed him, slamming him against the table, cuffing him as he screamed obscenities, his true, violent self finally on display for the world. "Order! Order in the court!" The judge banged his gavel. Kelly didn't flinch. She just watched, her face serene, as the man who had haunted her dreams was dragged, screaming, from the courtroom. The judge set the sentencing date, but it was a formality. With the SEC charges now public, Charles Vance was sentenced to 25 years in state prison for the assault and murder, with another 15-year federal sentence for fraud to be served concurrently. He would be an old man before he ever saw the outside world again. 6 months later, the Bel Air mansion had been seized by the government and sold at auction. The media had moved on. Kelly stood in front of a modest, sun-filled brick building in Pasadena. The sign above the door read, "Gracie's Place." Her father, Jim Harlow, stood beside her, holding a small box. "You ready for this, Kel?" he asked. "I am," she said, her voice strong. They walked inside. The building was filled with light, warm colors, and the smell of coffee. It was a center for women and children transitioning out of abusive homes, funded by the generous settlement Charles's lawyers had offered, which Kelly had accepted and used to build this. It was her redemption. She walked to the podium to address the small crowd of volunteers, survivors, and press. "When I lost my daughter, Grace," she began, her voice steady, "I thought I had lost everything. I thought the silence and the fear had won. But what I learned is that you can't be brave if you're not afraid. And what I learned from all of you, from the messages I received, is that I was never, ever alone." She looked at her father, who was smiling, his eyes glistening. "Gracie's Place isn't a memorial to a loss. It's a testament to survival. It's a new beginning. It's the home I always wanted to build. A place where safe isn't just a word. It's a promise." She finished her speech to a standing ovation. As she stepped down, her father handed her the small box. "I have one more thing for you," he said. She opened it. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was the small, dark lens and blinking red light of the camera from her living room. "The DA's office was going to destroy it," her father said. "I asked them for it. It's a strange thing, Kel. The very thing he used to imprison you is the thing that set you free." Kelly looked at the lens. She felt no fear, no anger, just peace. She closed the box. "It's a reminder, Dad," she said, "that the truth is always watching, even when you think you're alone." She walked to the window of her new office, looking out at the families playing in the courtyard. She was no longer a prisoner. She was a guardian. She had taken her deepest pain and turned it into a public purpose. She had survived. Kelly's story is a harrowing reminder that the most dangerous storms often brew behind the most beautiful facades. She lost a child, but she found her voice. She lost her home, but she built a sanctuary. Her journey from a gilded cage to a pillar of strength proves that even after the most devastating betrayal, resilience can build a new, more powerful beginning. Justice, powered by a father's love and a daughter's courage, finally prevailed. This was a story of survival. If you or anyone you know is facing a similar storm, please know you are not alone. The truth is out there, and so is help. Thank you for watching this story unfold. If Kelly's journey moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear a story of resilience. Subscribe to our channel for more true life dramas that matter.